Have you ever stopped to think about whether you really know yourself? Or have you, throughout your life, built a version of yourself that has been shaped by everything around you, except for who you really are? The truth is uncomfortable, and if there is one thing Nietzsche knew, it is that many of us spend our lives avoiding a genuine encounter with our own reflection. It is not easy to confront the unknown, especially when that unknown is yourself. We live in a society that constantly teaches us to define ourselves through external expectations. The pressure of what others expect of us, what we think we should be in order to be accepted, makes us lose sight of who we are deep down. Masks become part of who we believe we are, and so, instead of living an authentic life, we find ourselves playing roles that, in some way, are already ready for us. But deep down, you know there is something more. Something deeper, something that has yet to be discovered. And that is where the question arises. What happens when we finally look head-on at who we really are? The thought of facing our own essence is terrifying, and this fear is exactly what keeps us from living fully. The great irony, however, is that this fear is the key to freedom. Nietzsche, with his provocative philosophy, challenges us to question everything we believe ourselves to be. He knew that to live authentically, we need to let go of the lies we tell ourselves and dare to look at what we are avoiding. But what if you dared to free yourself from this fear? What if you could create your own identity, no longer dictated by others, but forged by your own truth? This is the first step towards freedom. Looking within, with courage, and allowing yourself to see the raw reality of who we are. It is an act of rebellion against conformity. Are you ready for it? From an early age, we learn that in order to be accepted, we need to fit in. Being who we really are seems too dangerous. The world teaches us that there are rewards for those who follow the script, who say the right words, who dress appropriately, who keep a smile even when everything inside screams otherwise. And so, little by little, we become masters of adaptation. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a state in which our identity is not constructed by us, but imposed by the collective. What you believe to be your personality may actually be a set of expectations that you have accepted without realizing it. You have been shaped by your family, your friends, the culture around you. But to what extent does this reflect who you really are? There are so many masks we wear that, at some point, we forget we are wearing one. If someone asked you right now, "Who are you?" could you answer without mentioning your profession, your background, your appearance, or the roles you play? If all these layers were peeled away, what would be left? This is a disturbing question. We become prisoners of the images we create of ourselves. But there is a problem. The more you cling to the mask, the further you distance yourself from your essence. And the greater this distance, the greater the silent dissatisfaction that echoes within you. The feeling of being lost, disconnected, that something is missing. All of this is the cry of your true identity trying to emerge. Nietzsche believed that the only way to free ourselves was to challenge these bonds. We need to have the courage to strip away illusions, to question who we have become and, above all, to endure the discomfort of being seen as we really are. But this is not an easy task, because removing the mask means losing the protection it offers. It means exposing yourself. And perhaps this is the greatest fear of all, being seen. But what happens when you allow yourself to face the truth? When you decide that you no longer need to hide? That is when the transformation begins. Shedding your masks is just the first step. But what comes next? When everything you believed yourself to be falls apart, you are left with an inevitable question. Who am I, really? Nietzsche saw this journey as the greatest challenge a human being can face. For him, it is not enough to remove the layers imposed by society. You must have the courage to create yourself. But this is no ordinary creation. It is not about inventing yet another mask, but rather forging, in the fire of authenticity, an identity that is genuinely yours. He believed that most people live in a kind of existential slumber, following inherited rules, beliefs, and values, without ever questioning them. They are cogs in a larger machine, driven by the inertia of tradition. But for Nietzsche, true life begins when you abandon this passivity. When you rebel against everything that has been imposed on you and take responsibility for being your own creator. This requires a rare kind of courage. Because there is no map to follow, no guarantee of success. The search for the true self is a lonely path. You will have to challenge everything you have been taught. Question your deepest certainties. Face your most primitive fears. But what lies on the other side of this journey? Nietzsche called this ideal the Übermensch, the overman. Not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. The Übermensch is one who has freed himself from the chains of conventional morality and has become the author of his own existence. He does not seek approval, nor does he submit to external expectations. He creates his own values, his own truth, his own essence. But few are willing to pay this price. Most prefer the comfort of illusion, the security of conformity. Because freedom has a price. Responsibility. When you decide to be the architect of your own life, you can no longer blame anyone. You can no longer hide behind excuses. And that is the choice you must make. Will you continue to live the story that was written for you? Or will you have the courage to write your own? If seeking the truth about who we are is the path to freedom, why do so few choose to follow it? Because the truth is scary. It shatters illusions. It forces us to face parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. And most people are not prepared for that. Nietzsche said that human beings prefer comforting lies to painful truths. We cling to narratives that justify our weaknesses. We accept ready-made stories about who we are and why we act the way we do. We create justifications. We convince ourselves that things are just the way they are, all to avoid the weight of self-accountability. But there is a price to pay for this escape. The silent discomfort, the constant dissatisfaction, the feeling of being out of place in your own body and in your own life. Something inside you knows that you are avoiding the truth. And here is the hardest question. What exactly are you afraid of? Maybe you are afraid of discovering that you are not as good as you thought you were. That you have built your identity on a shaky foundation. That your dreams weren't really yours. That your happiness depends more on external validation than you'd like to admit. Or maybe you fear something even scarier. The immense potential that lies within you. Because accepting your true strength means letting go of excuses. It means acknowledging that you could change your life, but you chose not to. And that's a heavy weight to carry. Nietzsche said that few can bear the truth because it demands radical transformation. You can't just know it, you have to act. It's not enough to understand who you really are. You have to become that version of yourself. And that means letting go of everything that's false, everything that's comfortable. But the question you need to ask yourself is, what hurts more? The discomfort of facing the truth or the regret of never having lived up to it? The choice is yours. If the truth about who you really are has been hidden beneath layers of illusion, how do you find it again? Nietzsche believed that the path to self-discovery is not simply a process of discovering something already there, but of actively creating yourself. There is no true self waiting to be revealed like buried treasure. Instead, there is infinite potential within you, waiting to be shaped. But to do so, you must free yourself from the invisible chains that bind your mind and spirit. The first chain is the fear of judgment. From an early age, we are conditioned to seek approval, to fit into imposed standards. But Nietzsche warns us, To live for the acceptance of others is to condemn yourself to invisible slavery. Who are you when no one is looking? Who would you be if there were no expectations to live up to? The second chain is attachment to the past. Old pains, old beliefs, labels you have accepted about yourself. What would happen if you allowed yourself to let go of all of that? Nietzsche invites us to act like a sculptor, hammering away at the marble of our existence, removing everything that does not belong to our true essence. The third constraint is the illusion of control. We want certainties, guarantees, a safe path to follow. But life does not offer us ready-made maps. Nietzsche saw greatness in those who embrace chaos, who dare to create meaning within uncertainty, who walk without guarantees and still move forward. Freeing yourself from these constraints is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process. It requires constant questioning, the courage to let go of old versions of yourself, and the willingness to experience life genuinely. And that is the beauty of self-discovery. It is not about finding an endpoint, a fixed and unchanging identity. It is about becoming an eternal becoming. About allowing yourself to grow, change, transform, without fear of letting go of what no longer serves you. Nietzsche teaches us that an authentic life is one that we choose to live consciously, where every thought, every decision, every act reflects a commitment to who we truly are. So, ask yourself, what bonds are still holding you back? And what would happen if you decided, today, to start freeing yourself from them? Imagine that at the end of your life, a divine being appears before you and says, "You are condemned to live this same life, exactly as it was, repeated forever. Every decision, every mistake, every moment of fear and hesitation will be relived countless times, with no possible change." Would you be in despair or in ecstasy? This is the concept of the eternal return, one of Nietzsche's most challenging thoughts. It should not be taken literally, but rather as a philosophical test. If you had to relive this life forever, would you live it the same way? If the answer is no, then something needs to change. Most people go through life as if there were a dress rehearsal before the main show. As if time were an infinite resource, as if there were a guaranteed second chance for everything that has been postponed, avoided, feared. But what if there isn't? Nietzsche challenges us to live with radical intensity, so that if we had to repeat each moment over and over again, we would have no regrets. This means abandoning conformity, refusing mediocrity, and taking full responsibility for our own existence. But why don't we do this? Because we are afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of failure, afraid of the unknown. We prefer the comfortable confinement of predictable routine to the risk of freedom. But Nietzsche reminds us, the greatest danger is not failing, it is never having truly lived. The eternal recurrence is not a punishment. It is an invitation. A call to look at your life with brutal honesty and ask, if all there is this moment, am I living it as I should? If the answer is no, then there is no more time to wait. Embrace uncertainty. Face your fears. Choose what makes your blood boil on purpose. Make your existence something so authentic, so deep, so intense, that if you had to live it forever, you wouldn't change a thing. Because that's the only way to truly live. What now? After you've shattered your illusions, challenged your fears, and faced life without guarantees, who's left? That's the hardest question of all. Because along the way, you've realized that there's no true you waiting to be discovered. There's no fixed destiny, no identity carved in stone. Everything you believed you were, everything that was imposed on you, all the certainties you once had, they were just constructs. So, what's left? Freedom. The freedom to not be a prisoner of the past. To not carry the weight of other people's approval. To not live by rules you didn't choose. Nietzsche gives us one final challenge. Become who you are. Don't accept external definitions. Don't try to fit into labels. Existence doesn't give you a manual. It gives you a hammer so you can carve your own essence. But this freedom can be scary, because it means there are no more excuses. That you are the only one responsible for every choice, every step, every path. And that takes courage. Courage to reinvent yourself every day. To shed your old skin when it no longer serves you. To leave behind old versions of yourself without fear of the emptiness that remains. Because this emptiness is not an end. It is a beginning. From it, you can create yourself, not based on expectations, but on authenticity. Not stuck in the past, but open to the present. Not afraid of uncertainty, but dancing with it. So, ask yourself one last time, who am I? And instead of searching for an answer, realize that true greatness lies in continuing to ask. Because what really matters is not finding a destination. It is having the courage to never stop transforming yourself. So, we've reached the end? Or is this just the beginning? You've been confronted with uncomfortable truths, challenged to question your own identity, and made to see that life is not something you discover, but something you create. And now, the choice is before you. Continue living as before, or embrace the transformation that has begun within you. But know this, there is no going back. Once you realize that your bonds were illusory, that your fear was just a shadow cast by that which you didn't want to face, you can no longer pretend you don't know. You have been called to something greater. The question Nietzsche asks us is not whether we are ready, but whether we are willing. Because the truth is that no one is ever completely ready to face themselves. But those who dare, those who take the first step, are the only ones who truly live. So, what will you do with this new awareness? Will you put on the mask again and lose yourself in the crowd? Or will you use this moment as a milestone, a turning point, and begin to carve out your own existence with authenticity and courage? Remember, the life you want is not in some distant future. It starts now, with the next choice you make. If this journey has made sense to you, if it has awakened something within you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Here, we continue to explore ideas that challenge, provoke, and transform. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Sometimes, a single idea can change everything. Now, the final question is yours to answer. Are you ready to become who you really are?